Okay, welcome back to the Family IT Guy podcast. Today, I'm excited to have Chris McKenna from Protect Young Eyes on the show. And we are going to focus on the topic of porn and kids being exposed to porn online. Chris, welcome. If you don't mind, for folks that don't know you, maybe give us a bit
Yeah.
of an introduction.
First of all, Ben, just thank you. I know we have interacted actually in person. We've actually met each other in person, which I can't say about a lot of people in this space. We met in Idaho last year, which was really cool. But I just so respect and
Yeah.
appreciate the balance and the intelligence that you bring to this with your background. I think it's just awesome. So appreciate this opportunity. I never expected to be doing this. I don't know if you did. Working in the
No.
IT space probably makes a little more sense for you since that's actually your degree. I'm a CPA who became a youth pastor who now is working in digital safety. That is not a normal path, but I
No,
can
no, it's
see
not.
not at all, right? I can see
Yeah.
looking back where, for me, I was exposed to pornography as a young boy. I think like a lot of guys my age, that was a pretty common occurrence. Pornography that was more two-dimensional, go find it or see it on a show sort of deal. And then, like a lot of guys my age who then came of age in college and young adulthood when the internet became a thing. So for me, that created this weaponized, fully accessible version of pornography that became really toxic for me individually, right? I think that's a pretty common story. So kind of fast forward a little bit, I had spent over a decade in business, loved that, business consulting, risk management, then felt called into student ministry and watched us then during that time from 2009 to 2016. That's really when we put portable internet in kids' pockets. And I looked at that through the lens of risk and said, Ben, that's a really bad idea. If me as a fully, supposedly, frontal cortex functioning adult didn't have the willpower to overcome certain digital temptations, what chance did the seventh grade boys and girls that were in front of me every day or every Sunday in ministry have to this? So to me, it became a consultant's problem to fix. Here's high risk. Here's amazing kids. Here's not bad, but uninformed parents. Let's do something about that. And that's really how I started Protect Young Eyes, was to educate families in my own church, which then drew others to us. There weren't a lot of people talking about online porn in 2014, especially in faith-based circles. But I find that whether it's social media or gaming or pornography or now AI, these are pretty agnostic spaces that, regardless of your worldview, regardless of whether even you're a parent or not, we can look at each other and agree on a lot of things. And I've really
Yes.
enjoyed having that wide conversation about really important issues that has then grown to be Protect Young Eyes and a team that travels the world and speaks and curriculum. And now, depending on when you listen to this, a book that is sort of the 10 years of all of this coming together in one place called Five Habits of the Tech Ready Family that I'm excited to share with families too. So just really honored to be here and to have a critical conversation.
Thank you so much. And for your work as well. And yeah, it was lovely to get to meet in person because same thing. There's a group of us that sort of try to cover some of these topics and
Yep.
we bump into each other on the internet. But, as the modern day is, it's not often you get to bump into each other in person.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you know, I I spend a lot of my time talking about algorithms and like social media and how that affects kids and how it affects
Right.
adults. And I spend a lot of my time talking about anonymous online chat. You have all these predators on the internet that are unfortunately intentionally coming after children, trying to hurt
That's
kids.
right. Yep.
And the thing that I have not talked about or covered at all is the porn problem. And I So first of all, thanks for sharing some of your personal story. And I can relate as well. I mean, I think as a male human, if you're exposed to if you have at your fingertips the ability to consume sexual content, your biology is driving in that direction. I mean, that's what we're
That's right.
put
Yeah.
on this earth to do, is to procreate, right? So um I mean, I it brings me back to, if I think about my childhood, like I was probably first exposed to porn on VHS. It would have been, I don't know, like elementary school. Let's just say maybe age 10, something like that. One of my
Right.
friends
Yep.
found one of his dad's tapes that and thank goodness. I mean, I think, one of the reasons I like to talk about this stuff is because I can't even imagine what it's like to be a kid right now and have just this unlimited access to everything.
Right.
Um, but then, yeah, even as an adult and a young adult, it's this it's a really challenging thing to pull at, and then it doesn't get. I don't know. There's so much shame that surrounds things that there's just I don't know if it's American culture or maybe there's some global aspect to it, but it just is not a thing that really gets openly talked about a lot. You know,
Yeah, that's right. And I don't think that's exclusively American. This is a global issue. I worked for a time, I did digital marketing for a software company called Covenant Eyes, which is anti pornography filtering and accountability. It's software that I used while coming out of my
mm,
own problematic use of pornography or addiction. Some people have a problem with that word. I sometimes use it fairly interchangeably, not because I'm trying to say I'm smarter than the DSM or doctors who haven't labeled it as such,
mm,
but I can tell you from personal experience when I look at the markers of addiction when it comes to gambling or other issues where you're trading certain portions of a good life for an addictive life, it has all the same markers. So that's just my own personal stance on the issue. But
mm,
so if I say addiction, just know I am referring to pornography. Wherever we go, this is a universal issue because it's neurological, it's physiological, as you stated, it's biological, and it is non discriminatory. I know that often it's talked about in terms of guys and boys, but it is so pervasive and ubiquitous that this is very much a human issue, both males and
mm,
females, both teenagers. In fact, Ben, I spoke at a high school over in Chicago. And as a part of this talk, the guidance counselor pulled me aside and said, Chris, I have so many students, teen boys and teen girls, coming to me struggling with pornography. I don't know what to say to them. It wasn't something she had been educated in. She knew how to deal with mental health. She knew how to deal with anxiety and depression or struggles at home or stress about school and tests, but teen boys and girls coming to her with porn issues was not something she had education in. So I don't publicize it whenever there's a need or somebody has this sort of request. I have a Google Doc where I've written from a teenager's perspective, something you can hand to a teenager so they can, with agency and autonomy, do a few things. They don't always have a trusted adult that they can go to because of that shame that you're referring to.
mm,
Ultimately, I always want to point them toward an adult because I can tell you from personal experience, whether you're 14 or 40, you seldom overcome a porn issue alone. It
yeah,
just it
yeah.
doesn't happen. And it doesn't that's not just a spiritual thing. That's just I know from thousands of conversations that that is a really rare thing. And so I want to point teens and adults toward others because in community, that is how you overcome this monster. So, just kind of a bit of a
Yeah.
framing for it. It is so universal, it is so everywhere. It's an issue that you and I had to look for. It's now an issue that looks for them. It is
Isn't it? Yeah.
bi-directional in a way that it wasn't when you and I were growing up. And we're within shooting distance of each other here with age. So I think there's a lot of things we had in common probably in our more analog childhood.
Yeah, the
But most of the
VHS.
trouble, most of the sort of sexualized trouble that we were going to get into was something we had to pursue. And because of those algorithms that you and I speak about and the places where kids even do their homework, that's no longer true. So,
mm. Your mention of the addiction thing has me thinking that I wonder. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I wonder if it's like okay, for me, I'm tempted to break the topic of porn exposure even for adults into like a few buckets. And
okay,
I don't know if these are accurate or correct, but let me know. So the first one is I could see a lot of adults coming back and saying, okay, well, maybe there's a healthy way to consume porn. Maybe there's a moderate, not secret, whatever you want to call it. Maybe there's a healthy way. And then maybe
sure.
there's a problematic way that isn't quite addiction. Like it's not harming your life, it's not harming your relationships. Maybe your spouse or your significant other knows about it and is okay with it, whatever it is. And then maybe the other one is like addiction, where there's harm, or there's problems that come out of it. Um, from an adult's perspective, are those buckets sensible, or do you find that it could be organized differently?
I think that's an argument that is a common one, right? So let's put some things out there that are realities. We live in a country where pornography is legal, right? If
Mm.
you're an adult of age 18, pornography is legal. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that obscenity is illegal. And there's a definition of obscenity that has
Oh,
been created in the United States. Most of the pornography that we abhor, like Pornhub and other just horrible places, that is actually definitionally, according to the courts and the rulings, that's obscenity. It should be illegal. It's just that we don't have a system, a Department of Justice that has ever enforced the obscenity laws that the country already has. And a lot of people don't know that.
oh,
There's a
yeah.
difference between pornography and obscenity legally. We group it all together just to say porn because who likes to say the word obscenity all the time? It just, right? We call it
Yeah.
pornography, but there's actually classifications from a legal perspective. I'm not trying to hijack the conversation with that, but these are some of the nuances that I think get lost in well, I can consume a little bit of porn. All right. Again, I'm just telling you, not only as a man who struggled with that issue, but having talked to thousands of adults who thought they could handle it, who thought their willpower enough is enough. It is a slippery slope. And I'm just asking you, what's the opportunity cost here? Like, what are you willing to risk
Mm,
by
yeah.
consuming a little bit of porn? Are you willing to
Yeah.
risk that a little bit of porn turns into a lot? Are you willing to risk that you try to sneak a peek at work and that's against the rules and a fireable offense? Are you willing to risk
Mm,
as a father that your kid accidentally picks up your phone and sees what you were looking at? Are you willing to risk? And
mm,
I could just go on and on and on.
yeah.
Because of that background that I have in risk management, I look at that list of risks and go, no, like those are
Yeah.
not relationships, professionalism, integrity as a father. These are not things I'm willing to risk for a little bit of porn. Is
Yeah.
it legal for me to do so? Yeah. Do I have a right as an adult to do so? Yeah. Is it easy? Yes. That's not worth it to me. Not even to mention, what do we know about the integrity of the porn that we're watching? You look at the statistics
Mm,
around human trafficking, you look at the statistics around just abuse and harm of women who are in porn, who are abused because of porn. Like, do I want to be responsible for not knowing the treatment and just the humanity and the dignity of what's going on the other side of the screen? Like, these are questions bigger than it's a little bit of porn that I think we need to be asking, are those second level questions, even as adults. And even bigger than that, like, are we as a civil goods society at our best, our most focused, just our best as humanity when we're watching porn? Like,
mm,
just sit in that question. And I think we know the answer. Like, if you have to ask it, you know the
yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to judge. I just want to put out there the realities of this and engage in a civil discussion around what is best for humanity, what is best for parenting, what is best for us and as a society. And I'm telling you, it is a society without pornography.
Yeah. I like that a lot. It really makes me think about, we are in this age where anything's possible. You can have access to anything you
Anything.
want as
Yeah.
much as you want, 24/7, no limits on this little tiny device that fits in your pocket.
Yeah.
And so then it really brings us as individuals and as a society to a place where, for me, it has me thinking a lot about personal values, family values, and I love how you framed it, an
Absolutely.
opportunity cost, and then the boundaries of what are we willing to trade. If we say yes to something, what is that versus if we say no to it? And this stuff I mean, sex is something, the concept, the visual, and is something that to ask almost anybody to say no to it, as thus the basis of the conversation here, is like
Yeah.
very difficult. I know, and I so appreciate you being as vulnerable as you're being, and I'd like to do so in exchange as well, because I think I would love to encourage everybody, given the nature of the topic. So I met my wife in end of 2021. Prior to that, I had been trying on my own to say, you know what, I keep hearing about how bad porn is, and I could see how it would have a negative effect on me. Let me try to manage that. And it had my ups and downs. And then
Yeah.
I met my wife, and she is very clear about her values and her boundaries. And one of the things I love so much about her is that she tells me what she wants and what she doesn't want. And she
Yeah.
was very clear that she doesn't feel good if her partner is watching porn.
Yeah.
And so I took that to myself as like, okay,
Right.
what am I willing to trade? Am I willing to trade my soulmate, the respect and the love and the care that I have for her, because she was so clear with me?
Yeah.
And that actually made it easier for me, to your point of, doing it on your own is super difficult. And so with the support of my wife and just in my own mind, it hardened my resolve to where, like, cool, okay, that's no
Yeah.
longer a part of my
Yeah.
life. Um, the
Beautiful. Yep.
I mean, it's just, I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for her clarity and supporting my clarity. But
Yeah.
like the values thing, and even helping me define, like, okay, what are my personal values for that, and what are hers, and how do we support each other? Now for kids, I mean, organizations called Protect Young Eyes, right? My focus is on kids. Like, I talk to adults primarily, but it's about how do we set kids up for success.
Right.
I don't even know where to start, man. Like, my son just turned 11.
Yeah.
I hit some of his friends have phones. There's no way that any of them haven't shown him something sexual on one of their phones or
Yeah.
tablets. There's no way they haven't,
Yeah.
right? I mean, um,
As hard
and I
as that is
haven't,
to say out loud, right?
yeah, and I talk to him a lot about the concept of respecting girls and respecting women, and we revisit that just in general. How do you respect yourself? How do you respect them? How do you support them? And how do you never, like, violate the boundaries, especially
Mhm.
of a female in your life? Um, and so, okay, so let me turn it back to you, if you don't mind. Just talk a little bit about what's the shape of the problem. What's the nature of the problem when it comes to kids and porn? What does that look like in 2026?
Sure. So there are stories and there's statistics. People will ask me, Chris, what's the average age that kids see pornography? There are different ways to measure that. It's difficult because you're often relying on self-reporting or when somebody as a teenager remembers when they saw it for the first time. Here's my response to somebody who asked that question. Does it really matter whether it's 7 or 10? Like, does it, at the end of the day, does it really matter? Let's just agree that there's too much porn that is seen by too many young kids too soon. Okay.
Mm,
That's our
yeah,
that's our frame. Then let's
yeah.
also agree that during certain phases of neurological, relational, and spiritual development, there are certain experiences that are more toxic during those phases of development than others because of neurologically where children are. When you're in the adolescent or even the early childhood phase, we've written a post called Too Much Too Soon, and I've spoken to therapists and counselors about this. As humans, we're intended to learn information and experience certain things according to a schedule, right? This is something you and I, as kind of left brain guys, can appreciate. There's like a sequence to things that helps the world make sense, kind of left to right. Developmentally, that's how the brain learns best. An example of when something is learned out of schedule, let's say a young child experiences the horrifying event of a school shooting or some traumatic event at school. What do? We rush a bunch of counselors and therapists in to help kids. Why? because they've experienced something out of order they don't know how to process. And if you think of the brain like a file cabinet with files in it that you put information in over time as parents and mentors and caregivers teach you about what things are. Okay, now I have a file for that. And when something like that happens, I know where to put that piece of paper. When an event like that happens, there's no file for where to put this paper, which is this experience that I just had at school. And that's not the topic we're talking about. But pornography to a young brain is something that doesn't have a file to put it because they don't
Mm.
understand what it means. And so therapists and
Yeah.
counselors will share that if a child has seen something explicit, and it's not just explicit, because I think violence falls into the same sort of neurological content bucket. Pornography digs a little bit deeper because there is this deep sort of lizard reptilian neurological biological need to procreate that's a little bit different than violence, so I will acknowledge that. So it goes deeper into us in terms of impacts. But that same idea of too much too soon with porn, parents who have come to me and said, Chris, we discovered my kid was having nightmares and we couldn't figure out why they couldn't sleep. They weren't settling down at night. They discovered that they had seen traumatic pornography and it was disrupting their sleep.
Whoa.
Stories from parents, the number one issue, Ben. So, Children's Assessment Centers, CACs, there's probably one within 100 miles of your home. There's over 800 of them all over the country. These
Mm.
are organizations that counsel both the victim side and the child who is offending side when it comes to sexual abuse. And when I interviewed interviewers at the CAC here in my hometown of Grand Rapids, in 100% of the cases in the year previous to when I had spoken to them, 100% of the cases where they were helping to counsel a family whose child had sexually abused another child. In 100% of those cases, that child who was abusing had been in early childhood exposed to pornography.
Mm.
Because
Wow.
when young children see pornography, they're often tempted to do pornography because they mimic and copy, and gross motor like to act out things that they've observed. Child on child sexual abuse most often has a common denominator of an early childhood exposure to pornography. So I'm
Mm. Wow.
framing the issue around that's not an adult issue, although I will say there is an Australian study that showed how often young boys, teen boys, and even young adults who view violent pornography have a greater probability of perpetrating sexual violence towards women, to your point about
Mm.
respecting women. So this isn't just a little kid issue. It's not quite as pervasive, but I'm trying to point out that developmentally, the question you asked me earlier, can we have a debate about ethical porn as an adult? Okay, I tend to land on one side of that debate, but sure, let's have a debate. There's zero porn that's good in kids, like zero. That was a debate that
Oh
was
yeah.
going on in a social media post recently. It's like, is it ever okay for a teenager to explore their sexuality by consuming pornography? No.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
questions that they're asking and the answers I want them to find are never found in porn when you're a young
Yeah.
person. So that is not even a debate for me. There's no ethical teen consumption of pornography debate to be had. So those are some pretty bright lines that I draw, which means we have to talk about it. We have to engage. I just posted last week a title that often raises a few eyebrows unless you have some context. And the title was Make Porn the Norm. Which at one hand, you go, Chris, you're totally contradicting yourself. You're saying, what, make pornography normal in child? No, you were talking about shame. The way you reduce shame is by putting things out in the light where they have less power. Let's normalize a
Yeah.
conversation. Let's frequently talk to our kids about issues that we want them to put in the light to land safely and softly with us. And pornography has to be one of them. So you can start to see how, even though you and I did not put any notes together for this conversation, how much it all
Right.
sort of weaves together when you look at shame and science and kids and development. Pornography is right there attacking at the root of so much of those issues.
Right. And then it's all amplified by all the other, like the algorithms. the porn sites, they lead the way in all the tech stuff, including algorithmic content delivery. Like they're going to show you more of what they think you want to see because they're in the ad business, and so they want you watching more and more and more and
Oh
more.
yeah.
And then I don't even know the AI thing. Let's put a bookmark on that and talk about that at some point today. But
Right. Right.
the gosh, man, the size of the flames in my mind on this problem are just so big, and just seems like they're just having nuclear fuel just dumped on them with every day that passes. But so, okay, the porn, make porn the norm thing. So the conversation thing, please, if you don't mind, talk more about that. I'd really like to understand that further.
Sure.
This episode of the Family IT Guy podcast is sponsored by me. iPhone parental controls are notoriously difficult to set up correctly. When parental controls are too complicated, parents give up. And when parents don't use the tools, children pay the price. So I created a step-by-step guide that shows you exactly how to set up an iPhone to protect your child from addiction and from predators. You can disable the internet, disable the app store, and disable the camera. You can make the screen black and white so that the iPhone becomes a tool instead of a toy. You will have confidence and peace of mind, and your child can be protected from the most dangerous parts of the internet. Go to familyitguy.com to learn more.
Yeah, it's one thing to say that, but context is necessary. So I, over the years, have had so many parents afraid of this conversation. And so I get that question all the time in the talks that we do. We go to schools and churches and do a lot of parent presentations. And there's always a spot in the talk where we, talk about pornography. Why? Because in our habits, in our 5-habit framework, habit number 2 is to pursue authentic connection. You pursue authentic connection through frequent, direct, candid, ridiculous conversations with your kids, just like you're doing with your son and the things you're talking about over and over again. You say algorithms, and here's the thing. And, there's a spiritual component to this too, that if someone's interested in, I'd love to explore, and I explore that in my book. But I want parents to be algorithmic with certain things. Think about, Silicon Valley is basically copying our playbook. They say certain things persistently and consistently enough, and kids believe it. I want us to be more persistent and consistent than the algorithms that we've said yes to our kids. That's how you get a kid's attention on an important issue like pornography. So, my left brain loves to put a number to something because it just helps me make sense of the world as a former CPA. So years ago, I was listening to a podcast. So Ginny Urich has a podcast that some listening to this probably know, called 1,000 Hours Outside, where she promotes kids spending 1,000 hours outside, and she breaks it all down into number of hours per day, per month, per season. It's brilliant. And I love it because it's a number I can hang something on and I can measure it.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, how does that pertain to the things I care about? And so I came up with 10 before 10. I want 10 conversations about pornography before age 10. And we've been saying that, and it's something measurable. Now, what I don't want is to contribute to the shame part of this, because there's some listening to this will go, oh crap, my kid's 9, I'm behind. And this isn't like some minimum
Yeah.
that if you don't hit 10, they're destined to be addicted to porn. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that the risk is you're going to talk about it too infrequently. That's the risk. And so why not encourage a posture of frequency with tips and different ways to have this conversation? So that post gives all kinds of different sort of age and stage examples. I even give the exact script that I used with my sons in different phases. I have 3 sons, an older daughter, who, from a very young age. In fact, I kind of joke that porn might be too normal of a conversation in our house. Like we just sort of throw it around, and we have to remember from time to time that when people come over that they don't, like you're sort of like the kindergarten. When you're the family whose kid first realizes Santa isn't a thing, you have to say, shh, don't say it, because you don't want to wreck all, I had to remember that my kindergartner or first grade son or daughter who knew the word pornography, like I was just waiting for the day that they blurted it out in class and I get a call from a teacher. Do you know what your son said today? Like, yeah, sorry, we talk about that all the time. What? You're
like, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh man.
Tell me more. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of all over the place here, but that frequency, but I think that intimidates parents. What I say, Ben, is I don't know you and I don't know your kid, but if you wait until you're ready, it's too late.
I can
I don't know
relate to
you and
that,
I
man.
don't know your kid,
Yeah.
but if they're ready before you are, so get it done. We're
Yeah.
the ones who
Yeah.
bring shame and apprehension. And the last one is, and I talk about this a lot in the post, one of the number one places where kids see porn is a place where kids sometimes go every single day. The third way I answer that question is I don't know you and I don't know your kid, but if they ride a school bus, they need to know the word.
Yeah. Mine does. I mean, this is a timely conversation for me just personally. So I'm getting, my kid rides the school bus, man. And we have not had the 10 before 10. And like I said, he's 11. So that's yeah, right. Cause I mean, what are they doing on the school bus except for showing each other stuff and messing around and getting in
Yep.
fights and, you know, having, playing games and whatnot.
You've got 40 kids, like diversification of age. You've got 5 year olds and 15-year olds all in the same
Mm,
place with one adult who's not paying attention to them. I hope they're paying attention to the road.
right.
That is one of the six most dangerous places for a kid to be online. So I don't,
Mm,
I'm not against school buses. To me, that's just a risk place that if we're going to put our
mm.
kid on a school bus, they need to carry tools with them to handle the onslaught of risk that may be coming at them since we can't control the other digital doorways that they're presented with.
Man, that's a great point. I've never thought about, and I love your risk assessment brain and framing. It's so true. I never thought about it like that, especially with the age ranges. You really do
Well, and
have a
yeah,
mixture there.
well, and that hits on a topic not related to porn that you and I are very passionately speaking about. And that's what makes Roblox so unique as a gaming environment because there are very few gaming environments that appeal to both 5 year olds and 25-year olds. And that's one of the reasons that Roblox is such a risky place because you have such a diversification of ages that you have to work extra hard to try to separate them, which gets into all kinds of face scanning nonsense and trying to appease older users and trying to create a safe environment for younger users, which you and I both know has failed miserably, right? So that same
Yeah.
sort of risk that exists in Roblox exists on the bus for that reason. Anytime you're in a digital space that is catering to both kids and adults, kids always suffer an imbalance of harm. I don't have any
Yeah.
problem saying that.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think so too. I mean, I look at most of the tech and internet ecosystem like that, where it's like, hey, these are systems that were built for adults. And the effect on adults is powerful. It's great. And the effect on kids, therefore, that are just duct taped onto the side of these wild vehicles that we have, floating around in the digital
Yeah.
highways is immense. I mean, because you mentioned earlier, like having a, hopefully because like, yeah, you said we're similar ages. I'm 40. How old am I? I'm 45. Maybe my frontal cortex is done developing. I wonder sometimes. I'm sure my wife wonders sometimes too. But like for kids, man, that there's just there's no chance. They don't even stand a chance in the fight with this stuff. It's just like I don't know. It seems overwhelming. So I love the idea of the conversation. Can you give us some examples of parts of those scripts or some of the powerful parts that you like to work into
Sure.
the conversations that you recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start off by saying this that sometimes what gets in the way of us just talking is we have this grandiose idea that we've got to do all this research and we have to create a presentation and we need to have them sitting down giving us their full attention and they need to clap when we're done. That is the
Hmm.
exact opposite of what I want this to look like. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. I don't want it to be elegant and polished because that's not who you're going to come back to when there's a problem. you need to come back to somebody where you can land safely and softly with them. And that is more often in just the normal course of life, having a dripped in conversation. We've talked about digital drips. In fact, I do a 60-second radio segment here with a Christian radio station every day. And it's kind of these little drips. We just want them kind of throughout the lives of our kids, reminding them of what's important. So I often talk about car time, meal time, together time, and bedtime. Car time, driving down the road, maybe dropping off for school. You just turn down the radio and you look at your son or daughter, a captive audience. They're strapped in. They can't go anywhere. It's a perfect time, right? Hey,
Yeah.
hon, if you ever see something that just makes you go, that's not good, I just want you to know that you could tell me that. You'll never be in trouble and I'll never be mad. Turn up the radio and keep driving.
Ooh,
Ben, that's a
nice.
porn
Okay.
talk. That's a porn talk, right? So I think we talk ourselves out of this before we even do the things that are really easy. Because I tend to put all the digital safety tips that we have at Protect Young Eyes, although I have this framework that I've written about these 5 habits that will apply to porn or predators or social media or AI or gaming. I wrote them at that principle level because I don't even know what comes out next week. We can't, right?
Yeah.
But everything that, and I think you could say the same, especially when it comes to porn, there are relational solutions and there are technical solutions.
Mm.
And if you start with the technical solutions, you get overwhelmed pretty fast. If I say DNS or routers, people just sort of freeze, although
Yeah.
important technical components to an effective porn plan don't start with the DNS system. Like don't
Mm.
start there. Instead, do the things that every parent or grandparent or caregiver listening to this, that you are uniquely ordained to do this. Just have a loving chat with your kid. I have parents who come up to me all the time after a talk, Ben, and they'll give me this whole list of things that they're freaked out about. Oh, my kid has a smartphone. I'm so afraid they're going to look at porn. I'm so afraid their friends are going to show them something. I'm so afraid of this and this. And they'll talk to me for 5 minutes about all the things that they're horrified about related to technology. And I let them finish. And then I say, have you ever said any of those things to your son or daughter? And they look at me and they go, no. And I'm like, I wonder how many of those things you're actually afraid of, you don't need to worry about. And you would actually rob power from those issues if you just spoke them out loud to them. Put them
Mm.
relationally out in the light where your son or daughter can say, yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's what happens. You rob power and you rob fear based parenting from us if we put some of those things just out in front of them. So, one of the sections of the book is tell them all the things you're afraid of. I want us to
Wow.
share these things with our kids because I think whether you're, you know, believe in spiritual ideas or not, there's a certain power that is robbed from issues when you speak them. And
Mm.
especially when it comes to the issue of pornography, I want us to speak in an age appropriate way. I'm not talking about ruining childhood innocence by saying all the horrible words. As I just said, we just had a porn talk in the car at a stop sign and I never said the word. So
Yeah.
that's a simple example of many that I give in this post. And there's a whole appendix, multiple pages long, of how to do this, in the appendix of my book too, because it's so important. But that's a relational side of this that we could do tonight. We don't need to go out and buy a router or do a bunch of research. Look for an opportunity. And I bet they're there when you start looking.
Man, I love that. I just the more I learn and the more experience I gain as a parent, it's like the more I expose my own vulnerabilities or fears or loves or
Yeah.
just emotions, that the more valuable it might be for my son and for the other kids in my life, my nieces and
Yeah.
nephews. Um, Man, it's great. I love the example. Like you said, it's you're not literally saying the words. You're not describing like, oh, if you see this type of activity, it's part of it is just a blanket. Like if you see a thing that doesn't fit in your file cabinet and that
Yeah.
makes you and that makes your gut feel uncomfortable, that it's a free pass and that you can just, yeah, tell me. Cause right. Cause then if you don't establish that and then they experience the thing or they even experience something that's truly harmful, I mean, you'd rather them go to you before they go to anybody else, right? Or go to anybody at all. I mean,
Yeah, because our default mode is shame. Whether you're 4, 14, or 40, our default mode is to hide when we feel badly. That's
yeah,
fight or flight. That's an amygdala in the middle of your brain doing its work to protect you from condemnation because you feel that, as especially a young child, I'm in trouble or I'm a bad person. That's a flight response that is natural in our survival and preservation as humans. I believe we were created, some of that to protect us from harm. But as a parent, we need to help them redefine where, like, what to do with that signal. That signal is not supposed to cause us to hide. It's supposed to cause us to run toward. And we can help redefine that fight or flight sort of signal to a healthy way. Naturally, it won't do that. So we've got to do that hard work with them. Be that frontal cortex for them when they don't have it yet. To teach it to think, what do I do next? And part of the way you do that, Ben, the way that you create muscle memory for something, whether it's athletics, music, or dance, is by practicing it over and over and over and over again. Right? I mean, you don't have to love them, but I mean, when you look at athletes who are the apex in whatever they are, I think Michael Phelps is maybe the most perfect example. And he was massive in the Olympics, when I was growing up and watching him. That dude had no matter what he was doing, his routine was the same every single time because he had practiced
yeah,
even what he did with his arms right before he got up onto the step to jump. Everything was practiced and consistent in muscle memory. It's almost like he had memorized how to be like the best at everything and just did it over and over and over again. And maybe he's not a great example, put whoever you want in that, Steph Curry and the way he shoots or whatever. But some of that is genetic. Some of that is you're just a different type of human. But a lot of that's practice. And I want us to apply the same thinking to our kids, especially with issues that are so emotional, that dig so deep into us as humans, like porn. There's almost nothing on earth that creates the kind of shame, that creates the kind of excitement, that creates the kind of confusion in an 8-year-old like seeing porn. So
mm,
we've got to
yeah,
redefine what that reaction needs to be so they run to us instead of away from us.
yeah. Right. Like if they experience a problem, it's like, okay, you can run away from the problem, but then I'm part of your solution. So you can run towards me, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And the folks that have asked you about, like, hey, I have all these fears, and then I love that. Like, okay, have you shared those fears with your kids? You kind of suggest a similar approach of packaging the fears in a more principled way of, I'm afraid that you're going to be exposed to things that make you uncomfortable. Like, I imagine there's must be some change over time. At some point, the conversation may have to get into the particulars, right? Like, do you
That's
see
right.
a
Yep.
graduation in that respect over time? Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I do. Your sort of intuition there around, hey, do we get to an age where you just kind of look at your kids and go, hey, porn is horrible for your brain and for society. Here's why. Human beings are trafficked in porn. Women are abused in porn. Porn is a bunch of actors. Porn is not real sex. This is not what actually happens between respecting, consenting humans. Like, do you eventually say those things to your 14, 15, 16-year-old son? Absolutely. Like, look them in
Mhm.
the eye, get their attention, and tell them how it is.
Mm.
I want to be the authority on these things. I want them to hear that stuff from me before, what I believe is the number one eraser of childhood innocence. YouTube gives them a different answer. Like,
Yeah,
I want to be the authority before they get all kinds of editorial versions through an algorithm. Let's be honest, you and I know social media, YouTube kind of is social media, just packaged as
yeah,
videos.
yeah,
So I want us to say those direct things, but we've all got to know our kids best. That's that pursue authentic connection, really understanding their heart, what they're ready for, warming that up with other more maybe age appropriate ways. But I've had parents, even though we sort of advertise our talks as PG-14, I've had parents bring their 9, 10-year-olds to our talk, like, nope, we've been talking about this stuff for years, Chris. I just want them to hear from someone else. All right, guy, cool. I just want you to know I'm going to say this, this,
Awesome.
and this. Okay, go for it. So, and what's strange is it's more often communities that make you go, huh? Like I speak at homeschool conventions and I'll have a whole Amish family there, like little kids through teenagers listening to these very direct. They're like, we've been talking about this openly and honestly about what humans are supposed to be doing and not doing forever. I don't care that my 8-year-old is in here. And I'm like, okay, great. So it's
Wow.
just
Yeah.
different families, though, need to approach it in the ways that work best for you. But all of us need to approach it in some way. There isn't a pass on this.
Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, where this problem is not a boys versus girls or one or the other, but it's both. So then I would guess within the context of these conversations, you got to give the same, and let me know if you disagree, but you got to give the same free pass to your daughters, give the same explanation of at the age appropriate time, like, hey, here's what these things actually are. Like, here's what's actually going on,
Yep.
behind the camera, the reason these people are on camera, what gets them there. And I mean, and you mentioned YouTube because for me, it's like you think about, you've got all the big porn websites that most people have heard of, and then you've got like a lot of the social media channels and Reddit and YouTube itself
Reddit. Yeah.
have everything, like there's,
Yeah.
and you've got the real stuff, you've got the fake stuff, you've got the nobody knows if it's real or fake. None of it is made unavailable based on how the internet works. Like anybody can access anything,
Yep.
unless you're some kind of tech wizard that you know about DNS and routers and stuff, like, which
Right. Right.
0.0001% of people
I
do.
know. I know.
Um, because that's the thing too, is like you have these algorithms that want you to watch more, and so they'll show you the people just barely like pushing the limits on all these different platforms with whatever they can get away with. Or even the encouraging of, like, I know for some young people nowadays, if you ask them like, what do you want to be when you grow up, I want to be an influencer, because it's like, seems like it's oh yeah, I'm going to make $1 million a month by attracting eyeballs.
Sure.
I would imagine there's a similar draw there with the whole, like, the OnlyFans or the whatever your channel's going to do, that's a sexual
Sure.
attraction kind of a thing, to where
Right.
like, oh, there's the easy money over there, so I'm going to sell myself, or
Yeah.
put myself in harm's way. Um, would you mind? So earlier you mentioned that there's a difference between porn and obscenity. Would you mind expanding on that a bit? I'm curious to know the delineation between the two.
So there's and I mean, the best way is to just sort of kind of definitionally. So it goes back to what they call the Miller test. And that's because of the case that it pertains to. So the Miller test, it's a 3-part test. I'm just going to ask the questions here because this is legally the questions they ask in order to determine whether or not it's obscenity or pornography. The prurient interest: does the work appeal to an unhealthy sexual interest based on community standards? Okay, that's an important part of that, community standards. Number two, patently offensive: does it depict sexual conduct in a way forbidden by certain state law? Okay, that's number two. And number three, lack of value: does the work as a whole lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value? Okay, so we're not talking about the statue of David or anything sculpturally or art. Okay,
Oh, okay.
there's a 3-part test here that you put things through. I can just say that almost everything that we put in the normal large porn buckets like X videos and RedTube and Pornhub is patently offensive and is all obscenity. It should be illegal according to
Hmm.
US law. Um, again, we just don't live in a world where that's being enforced. So
Right.
that's the difference that creates a lot of complexities when it comes to creating laws that protect kids from pornography, because we could have a lot of good debate around how do we do that. Are there privacy protecting ways in which we can separate children from adult? I think we're getting better at that, and maybe there are some zero knowledge or OS based or device based or whatever you want to say ways that we're not creating digital IDs. I'm never about scanning driver's license or any of that ever, right? So we've got to find a way.
Yeah.
Ben, I I just strongly believe, and I think, not everybody does. I strongly believe that the only way to protect more children from porn is to have bright legal lines that separate kids from adults. Therefore, I've observed, as you have, Silicon Valley has always come up with a way to solve tech issues. I mean, they can tell me how often I roll over at night on my watch. I mean, there's always
Right.
technical infeasibility never comes up until you're working on legislation. When it comes
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
engagement and algorithms and everything else, everything is feasible and possible. So
Yeah.
I just don't believe that we can't find a airtight privacy respecting way to separate kids from adults. That's the only way to protect
Yeah.
as many kids as I think you and I want to.
Right. Absolutely, man. Anything's possible when it comes to the way that you arrange the bits and bytes and to where you store those bits and bytes and to who gets
That's
to
right.
see them um and for me, I think back to like earlier we were talking about the technical ecosystem and the internet ecosystem, and in my mind I was see it's like this spaceship, and then you have kids just duct taped to the outside of the spaceship flying through space at a million miles an hour. I would love to see progress on the ecosystem side where
Yeah.
kids are also first class citizens. Now, the trouble is that the internet is a commercial environment. And so, therefore, it's like, well, who has the credit card is kind of the, is who the first class citizen is the one with the credit card at the end of the
Always.
day,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And, but like, how do we, like, it's certainly possible and feasible. And I think commercially viable to have kids be first class citizens, to have families be first class citizens, to
Mm,
have parental authority, the concept of parental authority
that's right.
embedded into the ecosystems so that parents can acquire devices that are specific to what they want and can give
Mm,
those devices to their kids as they need to or desire to, and have no concerns as to like that I got to play whack-a-mole every day, you
that's right.
know, and that I have to worry about what this adult iPhone is going to be if I put this lock and that lock and that lock. Oh, but I forgot that lock and I didn't even know this other lock existed. And that lock actually opened because like the other day I had somebody email me, hey Ben, we were setting up our kid's iPhone and then it updated to iOS 26.5 and then it took all the settings off. Like, okay, that's frightening and awful.
It is.
Um,
It is.
you know, so yeah, man, it's there's so much room for improvement. There's so much opportunity to make this stuff better. And I love in like the course of this conversation where we started with it's like talking to it's having the conversation. It's the relationship element. Like I love you said the relationship side and the technology side. And okay, so let's talk about the technology side for a little bit too, because I think that's a common thing. Okay, so I'm having the conversations, but I still also want filters, or I still
Sure.
want to have some protective, proactive measures.
That's right.
Have you found anything? And I know you mentioned like the software company you used to work with. Have you found stuff that's like your go-to? Like, okay, at a minimum, put this in place and put this in place.
Well, it's very device specific, as you know, which is why we have certain technical principles that we teach related to home networks being protected, related to devices being protected, that even if their Wi Fi might travel from network to network, so you need something on the device,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Paying attention to the location, because where we use technology, I referred to buses. There's other places where I don't want kids online. And then there's the apps themselves. So I'll say a term that, I know you recognize. The tech stack has different things that need to be done in it. We only see very little of the stack. There's a whole lot going on before things ever show up on our iPhone or our Android, as you and I both know, that are
Yeah.
failing our kids miserably. If I were to look at the number of things that could be prevented at other parts of the stack, starting at hosts and CDNs and other places, I mean, all of them are failing our kids miserably, and then
Yeah.
piling all the problems toward us as parents to figure out. The least technical part of the stack is the one that's always left holding all the crap that none of the other technicians and data scientists fixed before they sent it our way, right? That's the problem. That's
Yeah.
essentially every parent holding a kid's iPhone today. Is we're kind of like the guy in the circus behind the elephants. Everyone else loves the circus, but no one wants to be that guy. That's kind of every parent today holding all the technical junk that is thrown at us to try to figure out with software and filters every single day. So, we've tried to go out of our way, Ben, as you have. You and I both have guides to try to help parents, because I swear if Apple would apply just 10% of the ingenuity and UX and UI that they do to their Apple credit card experience to screen time, we could solve 90% of the pages in our respective iPhone guides. I don't know why they've
Oh
decided
man.
to
Yes.
totally ignore. That is the most complicated. I mean, why do they even call it screen time? That is the dumbest name for something that you want to protect
Doesn't even
kids.
make sense.
Doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. And it goes back to 2018 and the board and all these other things. And it's showing the lack of attention. I'm getting a little bit of a soapbox there, but your question on,
Yeah. Oh,
what are
please.
some, those are the principles, which is why if you've got a Chromebook, you've got to look at a guide for Chromebooks to figure out what works best on the device, what
Yeah.
software works on a Chromebook better than what works on an iPhone or what works on the smart TV, which mostly is going to be what's my filtering on the router like, or do I
Yeah.
enable whatever Roku or whatever, right? So that's what's tough, which is why you've got to find your trusted resources. And I hope as many parents as possible are hanging out on your website and my website to get that help, because the devices don't make it easy.
They really don't, man. And I'm just so, we've talked a bit about judgment today, and I try not to judge. I don't know what it's like to be an executive at Apple. Never done it, never been there, never worked there. I've worked at other tech companies. I I know that, for example, the only thing currently separating a completely tamper-proof computing environment for a kid from that kid is a one line on a policy for Apple's um, device management systems.
Yep.
And it's simply that the same capabilities that their corporate customers get, where, okay, and I'm sure a bunch of people listening to this could relate. You start a new job, day one on the job, you get your laptop and you get your iPhone. If it's a place where your work gives you a phone. But like, let's just pretend it's an all Apple shop. You get a MacBook and you get an iPhone. They will arrive at your desk pre-locked down, and there is
Provisioned.
nothing
Yep.
you can do. Fully
That's right.
provisioned, tamper proof. You cannot overcome that. And if you lose the device and somebody finds it, and this is the reason why they're made this way, so that the corporate information doesn't leak and the devices are locked down. the
That's right.
the there's an ecosystem of logistics. You have device distributors, you have software companies that make what's called mobile device management, where they can allow the corporation to remotely control and monitor all of the devices and
Yep.
determine if they're in an encrypted state or not. It's all there, and it's simply a policy that says that um, a consumer cannot use a provisioned device. And if that policy were to change in Apple, it would allow every family on the planet to have access to a tamper proof, fully controlled, like, device that doesn't say, oh, I updated to iOS 26.5 and all the settings accidentally turned off. Like, that doesn't happen in that
That would
environment.
never happen. That's right.
Yeah. And so
And,
I'm on the soapbox with you, man. Like it's it's kind of frustrating.
but you've alluded to the reason why. There is significant liability to the company by having devices that do not have
Yes.
that kind of provisioning.
Yeah.
Ben,
Yeah.
liability has always been the great constraint to irresponsible capitalism. It's always been that
Yeah.
way. So, unless we create a liability structure that makes it hurt to harm kids more than it does to addict them, we're never
Yeah.
going to change corporate habits. So, I
Yes. I
love that the
agree.
legal system is catching up to some of this. It's way behind still with porn, but it's getting there. But we lack a enforceable framework. What you just described, that kind of policy or that kind of provisioning. I mean, imagine a world, and this goes back to what I used to do at Ernst& Young. I was a Sarbanes-Oxley consultant, so I'd go into companies and help them comply with financial reporting controls. Why? Because there was significant personal liability to CEOs and CFOs if they signed a fraudulent 10K or 10Q at a public company because of what
Yeah.
happened at Enron. They
Yeah.
amped up corporate liability, personal. They pierced the corporate shield. It was personal liability. That made everybody line up because nobody wanted to be in prison. Okay. Imagine
Yeah.
a
That
similar
that
structure where
that made some change.
it made some change, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if there was personal liability attached to shipping out a bunch of devices that intentionally harm kids. What if there was a
Oh yeah.
design code that everybody had to abide by, an auditable design code that you could even create a whole new segment of service in companies like Deloitte or Ernst& Young, where they're now auditing companies against this technical design code that unless you get a clean bill of health from a third party, an attestation that says you're in agreement with it, you are open to any and all liability. The courtroom doors are flung open. Private right of
Yeah.
action coming your way. I guarantee that line of code and that policy you just talked about, like that,
Gone.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, so
Real quick. Yeah.
it's a complicated but simple situation we find ourselves in that we just simply don't have the same liability attached to the issues you and I care about that
Yeah.
make shareholder value at risk.
Right. Like I would love to see we have good Samaritan laws for doctors that perform CPR on strangers in public. So that if that person gets hurt and the doctor or the person was really trying to help, they don't get sued and into financial oblivion. And so it's encouraging positive behavior. I would love to see like a good Samaritan act around companies that demonstrate that, like, okay, if we knowingly have children on our platforms,
That's
as it
right.
is today, we take financial liability. So let's actually support those companies to say, look, if you can demonstrate, and yeah, via an audit or whatever mechanism, if you can demonstrate that you're a good Samaritan and that because it's at the end of the day, the trouble is that it's inevitable to have perfection. Or, I'm sorry, it's impossible to have perfection. It's inevitable that unfortunately that harm will occur. Like if you attach anybody of any age, but especially a kid to the internet, there's always going to be stuff that can go wrong. But if
Right.
you can identify a corporate player and perhaps even the CEO of that corporate player as being a good Samaritan, like, no, we really were trying to do right. And
Yep.
here's the evidence.
That's right.
Therefore, we can, not get sued into oblivion and we can
Yep.
continue trying to help. Man, that would be powerful. And at this point, I'm just kind of dreaming, but it's really it's always the cliche follow the money, but it goes both ways, right? Because you have follow the money in the commercial endeavors, which includes porn. Follow the money. What's the business models? What are the incentives? And then also on the reverse side, follow where the money can actually go
That's
from a
right.
liability perspective. And how do we we got to manage both sides. Um,
Yeah. No, great,
so
great thoughts. We've got to change the incentives there and create those
yeah,
safe harbor for the good actors. I agree.
yeah. Okay, so man,
I know
this
we've
is
been all
really
over the
great.
place, haven't we? We could
Yeah.
we're solving the world's technical issues one at a time.
I mean, it's just because it's so complicated. There's
It
so
is.
much to this. There's so much to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the technical stuff. So if you're okay, so you have to find a guide. So okay, whatever kind of device. Let me see if I can sum up some of what we talked about here.
Yep.
You have the relationship side. You have the conversations. The conversations don't have to include the explicit words. They can include the concepts of, if you're in trouble, you can tell me, free pass. You're not going to get in trouble for telling me that you encountered something that made you uncomfortable. I will help you. I'll support you. 10 before 10, have ongoing recurring conversations. If, and I love what you said, if it's got to be before you think you're ready, because if you think you're ready, then it's too late.
That's right.
And then the technical side is, what kind of devices does your kid have? So do they have a Chromebook or an iPad or an Amazon Fire tablet, or what kind of TV or what kind of phone? And then see if protectyoungeyes.com has a guide, see if familyitguide.com has a guide, or some kind of, hey, here's how to set those things up. Because a lot of them have inbuilt protection tools. And then if you're so adventurous, there's even stuff like on your home router, which, like you said, will only work for the stuff that's at home, including a cellular device that must be on Wi-Fi. Because if you turn off the Wi-Fi and then it's on cellular, it's no longer at home from the internet's
I know.
perspective.
That's right.
You've got Cloudflare for families. I know has like a DNS setting that you can plug into your
Sure.
router that does some filtering for free.
OpenDNS
Do
is
you
a
have
pretty
any?
good one too.
Oh, good.
That
Yeah.
yeah, OpenDNS and then clean browsing. Those are the three that you mentioned. Clean browsing actually is a techie dad. Not that, I love, here's a couple of dads having conversations about this, Ben, because we need more dads involved in this fight. But Daniel created clean browsing, which is in the DNS sort of clean, if you can find the dashboard in your router, throw these numbers in there and you're good kind of deal for that kind of technical
Oh,
side
cool.
of things. But you said something I don't want to miss. You said something important. I don't know if you knew how important it was on the technical side of things. You said kind of make a list. That may be a really important step that a family has never taken. Make an inventory of everything that connects to the internet. And I think a
Mm.
lot of parents are surprised as to how long that list is. That your treadmill probably connects to the internet. And there
Right.
may be a hidden browser in settings in the privacy policy to a hidden Google search that you don't know about that is easily solved with a router that it's connected to, right? So that
Mm.
inventory is actually a very critical first step because then what you can do is prioritize. You don't just feel overwhelmed. You're like, okay, I just found 25 things connected to the internet. Do I need to filter my washer and dryer, which connect to an app that's connected to the Wi-Fi? No, I'm going to put that one down at number 25. But that smart TV that's in the basement that could be watched in secret at night, yeah, I'm going to prioritize that bugger and let's tackle that one first. I think it just gives you a bit
Yeah.
of a manageable sequence instead of just being overwhelmed by all the technology in your home. Do it based on risk, give a number to each one, and then sort it based on highest risk and just tackle them one at a time, just like you said. So you said that, and I think it's a really important first step to eliminate some of that feeling of being overwhelmed because it helps you prioritize the work.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for calling that out. That's a really good point. And perhaps like the washing machine thing, it makes me think about like which of the devices. Maybe you can list them by like how interactive they are. Like how much back and forth can you have? How many
Yeah,
different buttons and functions? Because then the washing machine doesn't really have the interactive thing, but the treadmill thing, it makes me think of the Peloton bikes. So the screens on Peloton bikes are
yeah,
giant Android tablets.
that's all they are.
you know,
They are.
so
Yep.
so there's always something. The fridge. Some of these crazy refrigerators that have screens on the front. I don't even know what they're running, um, but yeah, that's good. And so, is there any other pieces? I think we could probably start to wrap up a little bit here. Like, are there any other pieces of the pie or pieces of the puzzle that we should consider or offer to people?
Yeah, It's to start. I put this in the post. It's better to be awkward than silent. It's better to be awkward than silent. Admit up front in some of these conversations, hun, I have no idea how to do what I'm about to do. I'm going to
Okay.
say some things that probably are going to feel super cringy to you, and I don't know if it's going to come out right, and I'm going to say it and probably go, "Oh, that was horrible." But I'd rather be awkward and honest with you than not say anything at all and try to get it perfect. Why? Because you're my amazing son or daughter. We live in a world that doesn't always want to treat you as my amazing son and daughter. So I might say some awkward things. Here we go. And, I think all of us can start there. And like anything, you build up a little confidence. You don't have to have a big, long porn talk at first. Maybe that's all you say. And you kind of go, I don't know when we're going to have the next conversation. There's going to be another one. I hope I do a better next time. And that's all for talk one. And
Love
I just,
that.
I
Yeah.
want us to just get the muscle going and do it.
That's so great. And I love thinking forward too about, because then your kid learns that when they become a parent, that they can take the same approach.
That's
Right. And
right.
like that's how you tackle the difficult thing.
And you can be honest and say, Grandma never taught me how to do this because it's true. Like we were raised by awesome parents who didn't model a lot of this stuff. We're the test parents here.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
embrace the awkward. It's going to be okay.
Man, what a great summary of the whole thing. I love that.
Awesome.
Well, Chris, this has been, thank you so much. I've really been looking forward to this. I enjoyed the conversation very much. Remind us again the name of your book. I'd like to promote it as much as possible. I can't wait to read it myself.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't know. For people who actually will watch it, you'll see 5 Habits of the Tech Ready Family. This is fresh out of the box of new books I just got. So,
Nice.
um, and depending on, you'll probably listen to this or watch this after June 16th, 2026. That's when it's officially out. Audiobook, Kindle, kind of whatever you want. Um, these are the principles, Ben, that work. Whether I'm speaking in Alaska or El Salvador, these are the principles that parents have said this is
Yeah.
what works. And so I am so excited to get this out. I told I'll just put on my spiritual hat for just a minute. A few years ago when I was unsure kind of what my next step was, I told God that I would sprint to age 55 and try to get a lot of stuff done. So this is one of those items that I promised to get done and out into the world. And I hope that it's helpful to as many families as possible. So
Man, good on you. Thank you for doing that. There's nothing I value more than experience. And so, capturing a bunch of experience in a volume for us all to learn from is lovely. And it's not easy to do that. So, congratulations. I hope the book launch is amazing. I hope that a
thank you,
bunch of
Ben.
people read it and listen to it. And thanks again for coming on the Family IT Guy podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ben.